Boy, the Christmas time can really be a stressful time, can't it? Even as I begin thinking towards the holidays, my mind goes off on the to-dos that have to get done every year. But what if I told you you could enjoy a more simple Christmas, and in doing so, reconnect with the real reason we celebrate the holiday? Wouldn't you like to experience calm in the midst of the holiday chaos? That's what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, I want to read you just a quote as we begin the program. This quote comes from today's guest, and it says, "Christmas is about the Christ, not the competition." Well, we're going to unpack that and so much more on today's episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective, where it's always our goal to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in their God-given identity. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson, and I hope you're excited about today's conversation. I want to start off this episode with a verse from Luke. It's from Luke 2:19 that says, "Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart." I'm wondering what you're pondering today, and I'm going to ask my guest the same thing. Today's guest is Tama Fortner, who's a multi-award-winning author with more than 40 titles to her credit. She's the writer behind the best-selling Indescribable for Kids series with Louis Giglio, as well as a number of books in the Jesus Calling children's line. Tama has collaborated with such well-known authors as Max Lucado, Rebecca Lyons, and Emily Lee to create inspirational books for all ages. And in her book, Simply Christmas, A Mom's Guide to Reclaiming the Peace of the Holiday, Tama invites fellow moms to slow down, take time for themselves, and savor the true meaning of Christmas. Welcome to the program, Tama.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here to help us talk about how to have a more simple Christmas. What I know is that with so many people that I talk to, our ministry comes out of our own hurts or trials or experiences. And so I'm really curious, what would make you write Simply Christmas?
You know, this book is the book I wish I had had when my children were little. They are our college-age kiddos now. But when they were little, we were blessed. And I say definitely blessed with all our grandparents still with us. They're great-grandparents. But at Christmas time, that meant so many celebrations and so many obligations to 7 or 8 places, within a very short time span. And I had this sense that everything had to be perfect. And it took me a long time and some hard learned lessons to figure out that it didn't. And I just wanted to share those and maybe give moms with littles today a shortcut on some of those lessons that maybe they don't have to learn quite as hard as I did.
I love that, because so often as writers, we do end up writing the book that we wish that we could have read. But will you share some of your personal struggle with comparison as a young mom and how you overcame it? Because I think that probably really does drive so much of the stress and the chaos around the holidays. We see those picture perfect Christmas cards and Instagram posts and Facebook feeds, and everybody else's life just looks so perfect. And it's tiring to try to measure up. So how did you deal with that?
Not very well in the beginning, to be perfectly honest. I married into a family that did Christmas, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Everything was homemade, everything was perfect. And my family had not done that. And it was overwhelming, this sense that I needed to keep up, that I needed to do things the way they did them. And I was blessed with some good friends who were willing to be honest. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge help. But a lot of it just came down to me getting the courage to say, It's okay if my cookies are store-bought occasionally. It's okay if I buy a gift card instead of the perfect gift. And it's really just giving yourself permission. And the strength to do that for me came from figuring out that I was a daughter of God and He loved me whether or not my Christmas was perfect or not.
That's key.
Yeah.
Because in our performance, in our striving, I think so often it really does come back to what are we trying to gain from it? And I know early in my adulthood, I was working myself literally to death, thinking the more I did, the more God would love me. But when we realize we're already a child of God and so loved by Him, I think that that can take the pressure off to perform to gain His love. Is that what you experience?
Absolutely. Finding my identity in Him was so key because I was seeking approval from everyone else in the world. And when you meet that level of approval, the bar moves. It's always moving. You never arrive, you never get there. And it's so incredibly stressful. But with God, you can rest.
Yes, that is such a good point. It's so very true. When we meet that certain bar, there's going to be another one,
Yes.
and then another one, and then another one. It's no wonder we become so exhausted trying to do all the things. So let's talk a little bit about how do I do a simple Christmas? You married into a family where all the things were part
Mhm.
of all the Christmas. So how do we begin to simplify?
For us, it started with a very simple question. What makes me smile? What makes my family smile? And so over the years, and this was a gradual process, we started evaluating how we filled up our calendar, what we did according to those questions. My son loves Christmas lights, so we go see the Christmas lights. My husband loves a decorated mantle, so we decorate the mantle. But there's this Christmas event in our town that everybody goes to that we discovered that we don't really care for, so we can eliminate that. Uh, Finding some shortcuts, not being afraid to buy instead of do homemade foods occasionally. It really is okay. It really is okay. But getting to the point where I could say that, it took time. I'll be honest, it was not easy with all these expectations around me.
And those are some really good practical tips. I don't think anyone's really going to remember come March if you had store-bought cookies instead of homemade cookies. But especially as women, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. But when it comes to our children, how do you make a simple Christmas for kids? And how do you instill in our children the true meaning of Christmas when they're surrounded by all the commercialism of the holiday?
There are so many tips and bits of advice about how to do this one big thing or teach this particular lesson. But for us, I found there's a verse, and I wrote it down because I'm terrible with numbers. Acts 17:28, about living and moving and having our being in God. And so for us, it wasn't the big thing, although we did some particular charities and events that our kids could participate in. Was as we moved through this season, we talked about God. We talked about Jesus. We talked about why we donate this. We talked about why we give. Those conversations with our kids, they're smarter than we give them credit for sometimes. And including them in the conversation and in the process kind of gives them a sense of ownership in the season and in the celebration, and giving them a choice about how we celebrate. For us, that was really how we did it. It wasn't one big thing. It was that daily living and moving and being in God.
And when it all comes back to that, then suddenly our priorities are centered right where they're supposed to be. Friends, we're going to take a real quick commercial break, but I want you to stick around because Tama's got a lot of insight and wisdom that she's sharing with us today about how to have a simple Christmas. We'll talk more about that when we return. Welcome back to your Hope-Filled Perspective, where today we are talking with Tama Fortner. She is the author of Simply Christmas. She says in her book, in serving, we both mirror and serve the King. That's what we really want. That's really what we want to teach our children. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about how do we make a simple Christmas for kids. So Tama, let's talk a little bit about what about traditions? You mentioned you married into a family where they did Christmas. So how do we decide what Christmas traditions matter and which ones to simplify and maybe which ones to do away with?
It all comes down to what works for your family. If it doesn't work, it's time to kick it to the curb. There was a tradition that my children loved when they were little, and that was we would mix up oats and glitter and toss it out to the reindeer at night before they went to bed. There came a point when there wasn't fun for them anymore. It was still fun for mom because I got those pictures, but it wasn't fun for them. And so that was when, we knew it was time to kick it to the curb. Another huge one for us is Christmas cards. They are very important to my husband's family, not so much to me, but I can respect that matters to them to get that card. So I figured out ways to simplify that process and zip through it. A spreadsheet full of labels that I can just print out and slap on an envelope every year. We don't do the Christmas letter that we did in the beginning. We've simplified to honor those people in my husband's family that want that, but also to make it work for us. And so I would just encourage listeners to give yourself permission to let go of things, to simplify things while still honoring your loved ones and your family and maintaining your own sanity. So.
I'm all about that. As a neuropsychologist, let's make sure that we maintain our sanity.
Yes.
I'd love to hear any stress-free gift and food ideas you might have, because that is a big part of any holiday. It's the gift buying and the wrapping and the food menu planning and grocery shopping and fixing, and then there's the cleanup. So what do you do to simplify those things?
In our family, and I'll start that with the food. At Thanksgiving, we do everything. We, meaning I, do everything. Everybody gets everybody gets their favorite dish. But at Thanksgiving, food is really it. You don't have all the extras at Thanksgiving. So at Christmas, we don't really do the big meal. We do the fun foods, and everybody kind of gets their fun, easy food. So we're doing fondues and dips and heavy finger foods that are really super easy. When it comes to taking things places, I do a lot of make-aheads. I'm here in the South, and sausage balls are a huge thing. So I make those up at Thanksgiving and freeze enough to go all the way through Easter. And then all I have to do is pop them in the oven. You don't even have to defrost. Find yourself some shortcuts, some go-to recipes that you can either freeze ahead or make ahead or semi-homemade. I make these killer snickerdoodles, but they're just sugar cookie dough roll, and then I sprinkle cinnamon and sugar on them. It's such a cheat, but nobody knows except you and me and everybody sitting now. But find yourself some shortcuts and gifts. I have mostly older people that I buy for now. I have a couple of kids, and kids, you try to do, the special toy. But for older kids or teens or adults, I love gift cards. I might jazz it up a little bit. If I'm going to buy a movie gift card, then I'm going to snag some, a popcorn bucket maybe and tuck in, some boxes of candy. for a crafter, I might grab a craft store gift card and tuck it in with some stickers and scrapbooking things. Just adding a little bit extra, but not killing yourself to get perfect.
That's good advice. I think people just want to know that they're loved and that they're remembered. And the gift
Yes.
cards allows them the opportunity then to choose that special thing that maybe they don't have the funds to choose, but it shows that you thought about them. How can we stay aware of opportunities to bless others? With the holidays being so stressful and chaotic, I think sometimes we lose the focus of what we can do to serve others because we're so busy trying to do all the things. But that serving, like that quote in your book, is so true. In serving, we both mirror and serve the King. So, how do we stay aware of those opportunities?
Again, this is a lesson that I learned the hard way. So I don't want anyone to ever think I have it figured out. I'm still very much a work in progress. But I'm learning that if I just stop in the mornings and breathe and read even just a verse or two, I try to do more, but sometimes it's chaotic. But just a verse or two in His Word to remind me of what this season is all about. And then I just pray, Lord, show me what I can do for you today. And then periodically through the day, if we will just take a moment to breathe in that carpool line, in that grocery store line, right before that conference call, breathe and just say His name. There's something about that is so powerful. It centers me and reminds me of who this is all really for and who's really in charge. And thank goodness it's not me.
And I think that as we're open, the Lord will bring people across our path. Maybe it's somebody who's spending a holiday alone and they would just love to have coffee with you or to be included in your family meal or someone to sit with at church for that Christmas Eve service because they're alone and feel lonely. I know that the Lord, if we are surrendered, as you suggested, He's going to bring those people across our path. What ideas do you have for staying mindful and intentional through the holidays? It's so easy to get caught up in that chaos that I think sometimes we just do without being intentional.
I try to surround myself with scripture. For me, everything needs to come back to God because if I try to set my own path, my own intentions, I get out of whack really fast. So I try to surround myself. I have Post-it notes here and there. I have Bible apps that pop up reminders. I have things on the wall. I have my try to be a set time, but life happens. So I try to get time every day with God. It's that, again, it's back to that living and moving and being in Him and allowing Him to set my intentions. And that's, I guess that's, I'm very intentional about allowing Him to set my intentions. Not always easy, so easily distracted. So it's a continual process, a continual reminding, which is part of why I surround myself with scripture because I forget a lot.
But that's where we're going to be until we meet Him in glory. And by surrounding yourself, it does bring your mind back to where your focus should be. You and I are very much alike that way. I've got notes all over the place because visual reminders refocus me on what is really important. We write down the things that are really important. And so when we have those visual reminders, that's where our mind is going to go. Friends, I really hope that you're enjoying this conversation. I'm already getting some ideas for what I can do differently to experience calm in the midst of holiday chaos. We're going to take a real quick break, but when we come back, we'll wrap up this program and find out Tama's hope-filled perspective for you this holiday. We'll be right back. Welcome back to your hope-filled perspective, where today we've been talking about how to have a simple Christmas and how to really stay focused on the real reason we celebrate. Tama's book, Simply Christmas, is short, but it's beautiful. It's got beautiful illustrations, and I promise you, it will help start your day right. I love where she says, a change in plans just might be part of God's perfect plan. And Tama, that's not something we've talked about yet. What would you say about making room for God to redirect our steps during the holidays?
Something that I've been thinking about lately or noticing is that how much of Jesus's ministry was centered around interruptions and changes of plan. And if the Lord of creation
Yeah.
used interruptions, then I should be more accepting of interruptions and looking for opportunities instead of being annoyed. Take some breathing sometimes because I've got my to-do list. But I'm finding that when I do that, and I don't always, but when I do look for those opportunities in the interruptions, that's when I'm finding people and what they really need. And sometimes it's just to sit and listen. And I might be late for something, or I might not get something checked off my to-do list, but I get the feeling maybe I got some checked off God's to-do list. And isn't that really what we're here for?
Yes. Love that. You might just be getting something checked off God's to-do list. For the busy moms out there, how do we come back to that place of peace? Is it like you said, you've mentioned a couple times now, really starting off your day in the Word and having scripture around you? Is that what helps dampen the chaos and elevate the peace level overall?
That is a huge part of it. I think another part of it is letting other moms be good at what they do and not feeling like you have to be good at it too. Um, I have a mom who is a friend who's a fabulous decorator. Her class parties always look better than mine. And that's okay. That's okay. She can do her thing and I can celebrate her, and that makes her happy. I don't have to do that. And giving ourselves permission to cheer other moms on and not compete takes away a lot of my stress and gives me time to recenter myself on God.
What suggestion do you have for our listeners today that they could really begin implementing today to make a change in their life and have a more simple Christmas?
Something that I've done the last few years is along about, Thanksgiving, a little bit before, a little bit after, whenever you can work it in, take a little time. Maybe you can sneak away for a quiet hour, a cup of coffee. Maybe you're in the carpool line. Maybe it's between meetings, whenever you can. And think about what you want at the end of the Christmas season. What do you want to have gotten out of it? And then let your calendar, your to-do list reflect that end goal. So that will help you figure out what you can eliminate, what you can simplify. And yeah, you maybe really don't want to do this, but it's so important to the ones you love. So you can incorporate that as well. Because it isn't just our Christmas, it's their Christmas too. But yeah, I would just take some time and think about that end goal.
In doing that, I think it will back up everything. When we take that time to reflect on what is the end goal, is it making memories, or is it enjoying food, or is it the celebration? Whatever your personal end goal is, you're then going to put the things in place to make that happen. But maybe that's a good key of what other things can fall out. But I know that we've got some people today, Tama, who are really struggling with stress and overwhelm. Maybe it's about the Christmas season, or maybe it's life, and the Christmas season just adds on top of that. As we wrap up this episode today, what hope-filled perspective would you want to offer to that listener?
Oh, remember God. Remember that He loves you, that you don't have to perform to get His love. He is there to cover you with His grace. He is there to fill you with His strength. Just take a deep breath and let Him love you. Let Him lead you.
And in doing that, that simplifies everything down to the one that we celebrate at Christmas. He is the reason we celebrate. And when you focus on Him, all the other stuff can kind of sift out.
Mm-hmm.
Friends, I want to remind you of Jeremiah 29:13. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. That is basically what Tama has been sharing throughout this episode, is that it all comes back to where is our focus? What are we seeking? And then what are we going to put in place that represents what we're seeking? When we are seeking Him, the real reason for Christmas will be paramount. And I think you will experience more of His peace because He is our peace. Tama, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective to share how we can have a more simple Christmas and really get back to the real reason for the holidays. Friends, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of Tama's book, Simply Christmas. We will link all of her information in our show notes that you can find at drmichelleb.com. It's been a delight to be in your company this week. I hope that this has been a few peaceful moments in the midst of what might otherwise have been holiday chaos. Until we meet again next week, may you have a hope-filled week.